We ride again here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Thank you for joining us here on a Monday, a Memorial Day Monday. First, let us say happy Memorial Day, and thanks to all of those that have given so much so that we can have a wonderful 3-day weekend. I hope everybody did. I know I did. Hopefully Rany did. We'll find out here in a minute. And, of course, we get a chance to watch some Royals baseball, which we'll talk about right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. We're going to talk about our playoff optimism meter, of course. Who's the bigger threat, Guardians or Twins? Has Salvador Perez really learned to be a better hitter at age 34? I continue to be mystified by his ability to judge the strike zone at such an older age. Who is the Royals MVP? How big is the loss of Michael Massey for this ball club? We're talking about it all right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Well, the dreaded double thump did occur today, but it was actually to be expected. I don't get upset about that because when I lived in Las Vegas, I bet enough baseball to realize prolonged win streaks, when they become a thing, people start talking about them, they usually end with what I call a double thump, 2 losses. I don't know if it's just the likelihood, hey, you won all these games in a row, so you're kind of due for a couple losses, or if it's a little bit of a mental thing, don't worry about it, we'll get them tomorrow, and you don't really dig back in the same way you did in the past. I don't know what it is, but it always seems to happen. It happened again here for the Royals. I don't see it as a big thing. It doesn't affect my optimism. We actually get to giving our number for the playoff optimism meter. We'll find out if it affects Rany's. Dr. Rany Jazayerli with us, of course, as always. And we're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Rany, 8-game win streak, man. I'll give some numbers on that here in a minute, but that's pretty impressive, even with a couple of losses. Hard-fought losses, by the way, at the tail end.
The dream continues, Soren. Every week we come on and it feels just a little bit surreal, just a little bit like this isn't really happening, or that the bubble is about to pop. And since the last we spoke, the Royals went to the longest winning streak in 7 years. Their second longest winning streak where every win was by multiple runs in the history of the franchise. The only other time they had won 8 consecutive games by multiple runs was in 1977, the best and hottest team in Royals history. They keep doubling down on the unlikelihood of this season. I think sometimes it's easy to get, really deep down into the minutia of each individual game and, how the Royals are doing this and, the starting rotation, et cetera, and not take a step back and just recognize that the Royals, we have to start taking seriously the possibility that the 2024 Royals will be the most improved team in Major League history. Let's not lose sight of the big picture here. And when you put it like that, it seems incredibly unlikely for any team to do that. But every week we come on and they're not just on pace to do that, but they're actually elevating that pace. And even these last 2 games, can't reduce the optimism that much, especially when you consider today. I mean, they were down 6-1. This looked like the rare game. It might have possibly been like only the 5th time all season they played a game with a meaningless 9th inning, and they got the tying and winning runs into scoring position for Bobby Witt Jr. before the Twins were able to extinguish things. So, this team is just never out of any game. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Yeah. Listen, I am too. And like I said, and I kind of maybe spoiled the thunder a little bit. I'm not concerned at all. I told my buddy, who's a big Royals fan, we were hanging out last night. He said to me, because he's heard me a million times say, he goes, well, if we can just avoid the double thud tomorrow, I'll be really optimistic. I said, I'm going to be really optimistic. I said, I expect the double thud. And in fact, if they weren't having to, if the Twins weren't laying like, I think it was 155 or 160, I'd be all over them. I mean, it's something I look for, and it's an auto bet for me now that betting's legal again. Teams just do it. When you get to that 7, 8, whenever it starts to be a thing, right? It's not 3, it's not 4, it's not 5. It's whenever it starts to get some run. It's in that about 7, 8 range. It just always seems to be a thing. So this doesn't bother me. They battled back. Joe Ryan was the better pitcher. It was Alec Marsh that was out there, and he still went 7 and didn't burn the bullpen. So it was still a quality loss, for him. It was a quality loss for this ball club to fight, to burn some Twins bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
So even in losing, they look like a competitive team. So, I did put up the comment a second ago about, well, I fear this might be our first, losing month, or losing week, excuse me. That could be the case. Yes, that could happen.
We're one game in. Let's slow down. We're 0-1. We got time to come back and get back to a 500 record this week.
And if you like we do it with the start of a series on Monday is how we do the week, not the calendar week. Yes, but even if you want to do it the other way and be pessimistic, fine. It happens.
Sure.
Right? They're playing quality opponents, but they're still playing quality baseball. And I like where, who was it who said, I like, with our two aces, I can't remember where it was behind by the way, the Hernandez retirement was good here, right here. Common said, I predict the Royals take the next 2 behind their duo of Cy Young contenders. They have the better starters. Doesn't mean they're going to win both, but they have the better starters the next 2 days, which is something we wouldn't have thought about these Minnesota Twins coming in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do want to point out, this is an important series, right? If you believe that there are essentially 2 other teams that could win the AL Central crown at this point. Now, the Tigers, I'm not going to rule them out entirely, but to me, it's when we'll talk about which one is more of a threat. But the Twins and the Guardians are the teams we have to beat if we want to win the division. Not necessarily make the playoffs, but at this point, winning the division probably means, and this is not something we would have expected at the beginning of the year, but if the team that wins the AL Central will probably be either the 1 or the 2 seed, which is very important because the 3 seed doesn't get a bye. Remember, the rules have changed. The playoffs have changed since the last time the Royals were in a position to care about them. And the number 3 seed will play the number 6 seed. They get home field advantage for all 3 games, but it's a best of 3 series. That it's not something I'm a big fan of. I think winning the division should mean something. But at this point, if whoever wins the AL Central is likely to get a first round bye. So it does matter to win the division as opposed to just make the playoffs. And the Twins and the Guardians, those are the teams that one of those 2 teams is going to be our competition for first place. So the Royals have 3 more. This is a 4-game series. They've got a chance to, I believe it's a 4-game series, but they have a chance to really put, if they win out the rest of the series, they have a chance to put the Twins. There's 3 more games, so they'll have a chance to put the Twins 7 games back. So this is not, you're not gonna lose the season to the Twins in this series, but you could put them away or almost put them away here. So having Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo out there in the next 2 games, Joe Ryan has always been, I don't know if he's the Twins ace, he probably is, but he's certainly the ace against us. Like the Royals just have never been able to hit him. They weren't able to hit him today, and yet they were still able to, again, bring in the closer in the 9th inning. And you mentioned Alec Marsh. Like, I was worried, one of the reasons why I remain optimistic is even when they have a game like today, when he gave up that second home run, I'm thinking to myself, man, is this the Alec Marsh we saw last year? But then he comes back. It was the 5th inning. He strikes out the next batter. He comes out for the 6th, goes 1-2-3. Comes out for the 7th, gets the first 2 outs, gives up, I think, a single and then a strikeout to end the 7th inning. I mean, 7 innings. He basically made 2 mistakes, both with men on base, but otherwise pitched a great game. 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, 5 hits allowed, and that's your number 5 starter. Yeah. Michael Wacha, yesterday had a perfect game going through 5 innings. his slider, which he did not throw until like 2 weeks ago. I think he threw his slider like it was his second most used pitch yesterday. Like, teams have been trying to get Michael Wacha to throw a slider for a decade since he made the major leagues. And Brian Sweeney, Baseball Spags, has suddenly taught him a slider, or somebody's taught him a slider. And I think that has changed my perception of Wacha. Those are your number 4, number 5 guys. As long as this rotation stays healthy, I have confidence they will be in every game and win their share, and hopefully more than their share of them, which means that they're going to be in the race all season long.
Yeah, no, for sure. By the way, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best for more than 30 years. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty, every single one. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Yeah, listen, there's nothing. I don't know how you could back up the bus right now, right? There's no way your number could come down, could it?
Well, my optimism meter, no. I mean, not after a week like this. I mean, the last 2 games, okay, like you said, it's an emotional thud, but I mean, they won 5 games since we last spoke before losing 2. They've gone 5-2 since you and I last spoke. If they keep going 5-2, the meter is not dropping. I can tell you that. So
yeah, no, I agree. All right, so what's your number?
So, well, before I get to our numbers, I feel like it probably is worthwhile for us. I mean, I assume you've chosen your number. I don't want it to be biased by this, but it's useful to take a look at some of the projection systems that are out there to see what, they are saying, an objective computer algorithm based. You can look at a couple of different sites. Baseball References is a very simplistic system, and it also takes into account a team's record going back to the previous season. So I don't use that one. The ones I like to look at are Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus. So and it's interesting because I went back and looked at the numbers week by week. So 3 weeks ago, Fangraphs had the Royals' odds of making the playoffs at 29.4%. 2 weeks ago, it was 36.5. Last week, it was 52.5. Where do you think it is this week?
58.
64.
Okay.
So, I mean, it jumped quite a bit. Now, Baseball Prospectus, and Baseball Prospectus notoriously has had a skepticism of the Royals as an organization going back more than 10 years, going back to their previous, pennant-winning teams. So I was amused to find that, yes, their numbers are not as optimistic. But so Baseball Prospectus today has, and I believe this does not count today's game. Fangraphs does. But they only have the Royals at 44% to make the playoffs. But what's interesting is that just 1 week ago, it was at 23%. So even Baseball Prospectus, as skeptical as it has been up until this past week, you can see in the projection systems, this last week feels like a bit of a tipping point where the amount of data, the sample size just keeps growing. And the quality of the sample also keeps improving. And I think, both systems, but especially Fangraphs, are saying they're better than 50-50 to make the playoffs. And I think we have to take that seriously. So my number was 6.5 last week. I'm up to a 7 now. I mean, essentially, what we're saying is I think the Royals are 70% likely to make the playoffs. I'm at a solid 7 now. I don't see how after a week like this, again, as long as they stay healthy and the Michael Massey injury, that's something that worries me because he was such a key part of the offense. But as long as the 5 starters are out there making their starts every 5th day, I don't see how I could be below a 7 at this point.
Well, I'm a 5.5.
Okay.
And I've always been behind you. And I will say the reason remains the same. I do continue to creep up. I started at a 4. Right when they got off to the good start, I've just kind of been a half point up along the way. I don't think I moved the first time you moved, but the fear is we're now a third of the way through the season, but still just a third. Massey's gone down. We're going to talk about his importance, and somebody, I saw one of the comments. I put it up there about how, well, what does it say when Massey's a big loss? I mean, he had some timely hits. He was adding some thump. He was lengthening the lineup. It's not that Massey is the end all be all. but he was another quality hitter. And when you see the comments about MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe, now you're putting another one of those guys in there, right? That's the problem, unless Lofton or Frazier, and Frazier's being the guy we assume, unless one of them's going to really take off. That's the problem. So the injuries, what happens? When does he come back? Who else goes down? That to me is the thing that they're just, I still don't believe they're prepared for.
Absolutely.
I actually think this broken ass lineup, right? Which in some spots it's very shiny. We're going to get into Vinnie. He's not really hitting right now. I'm sure we'd bet, will he come back and start hitting again? I vote yes. I'm sure most of us would all say, yeah, that's it. He's going to start hitting again. But right now he's not. And so when he's not, all these holes kind of become more exaggerated. This lineup can get its way there because of how good the pitching is, but I just don't know how much water they can take on. So I'm not quite as optimistic. I am above. I think we should be above 50%. I think 64%. I don't know how you can hate on them. And I know you weren't making a big deal like, oh, Baseball Prospectus, but they are generally, you're right. Because like all throughout their run of, contending from 13 to 17, they were, massively, the Pacoda number was way below.
Right. I mean, the Royals, the way they constructed their team, both there's two things that kind of broke the Pacoda system. I mean, the Baseball Prospectus projections, and as someone who was there for many years, I can testify to it. And the people there will tell you, like, it's not a bias or a hatred. It's that the Royals built those teams with a pretty mediocre rotation, but an incredible bullpen. And bullpens are so volatile that any projection system is going to look at a bullpen that may be great in the moment and say the likelihood that this continues is less, than a starting pitcher continuing to pitch well. And the Royals were able to defy the odds for several years there with that bullpen. And then the other thing is the offense was not built on power; it was built on contact, and that's also there's a lot of volatility there. But that 2015 team, relative to the league, analysts will tell you, might be the best contact hitting team in baseball history, certainly in sense like World War II. Relative to the league, the 2015 Royals struck out less than any team since World War II. And I mean, we saw it in the playoffs, how many times they made things happen, not even with hits necessarily, but simply by making contact. So, it was a delight as an analyst to see a team break analytics, like to defy it, not so much by saying they don't matter, but saying there are certain things that analytics either are not picking up on or are overrating the variability of. And the Royals were able to make those things consistent. They were able to consistently make contact. They were able to consistently win games that were tied after 7 or 8 innings to a degree that most teams just can't do. There may be a little bit of that here. I think the skepticism here really comes down to how much do you weight previous seasons? Because it's a very obvious reason why any projection system would be skeptical of the 2024 Royals. It's because of the 2023 Royals. They lost 106 games last year. Like, you can't just ignore that. But to me, obviously, analytically, I completely understand that. In fact, frankly, the 64% that Fangraphs has them at is remarkably high when you consider where this team was a year ago, and it's a testament to how well they have played this year. But as a fan, I think it's just delightful. We should want teams to defy, expectations. It makes the game more fun, more exciting, and I think this Royals team, if they maintain this, I think is going to catch on, much like the 2014 Royals did, certainly in October, as a Cinderella story. I don't know if it's going to be a quote-unquote Cinderella story for this year's Royals, but in terms of a team that came out of nowhere, so to speak, that always catches the public's attention in a positive way. And I think that the Royals are already starting to make believers out of people who follow the sport closely, because it looks legit, and yet nobody saw it coming.
How about the 8-game win streak? There have been 13 seasons that they won 8 games in. There have been 21 times they've won 8 games or more. Like in 77, they won 8 games or more in a row 4 times. 4 times.
That team,
including a 16-gamer, which is the franchise record.
They won 16, they lost 1, and then they won 8. I don't think people realize the 77 Royals aren't the best team in Major League history or anything, but they, late in the season, are about as hot as any team has ever been. They won 24 out of 25 games.
How many times do you think they made the playoffs?
Out of those 13 seasons?
Yeah, and I'd have to back out some. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so out of the 13 seasons in which they had an 8-game winning streak, what's interesting, of course, is how rare an 8-game winning streak has been in the last really quarter century. So like very few of those, I think, were in the 21st century. They've rarely had a 7-game winning streak. I mean, 6 games is about the most they've topped out at. So I'm going to say of the 13, and keep in mind they've made the playoffs, 9 times total? I want to say, I mean, that's the problem. There's only 9 seasons that they made the playoffs at all. And how many of those did they have an 8-game winning streak? I'm going to say 6.
6 of them.
6.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so basically more than half the time that they've had an 8-game winning streak, it's resulted in a playoff season. But let me give you some other numbers. One of those years was 64 and 51. It was the strike year of 94.
Okay, so 6.5, let's say. We'll call that one an asterisk.
So you could throw that out, and it gets to 60%. Let's call it. 6 out of 10.
6 out of was it 13 seasons? I thought you said so. 6 out of 12. It would have been 50-50.
Yeah, 6 out of 12. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, so 50-50.
And I did this last minute, so I need to really digest it, make sure I haven't screwed something up and trying to do it really fast before we got started here. But there are also 90-win seasons, an 89-win season. Let's see, 92 wins in 1989, right? 90.
That's a season they would have made the playoffs under the current format. So that's the other thing.
Yeah. They won.
Did they finish under 500 in any of those years? Did they ever have a
give me 1 second. Record? Give me 1 second. They won.
I actually think they did. I actually think I know the year. Can I guess?
Just a minute. They won 90 in 82 and didn't make the playoffs. They won 91 and 75 and didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
So those are 93 more 90-win seasons. They have some 80. They won 89 and 14. They had 2 8-gamers in 14, maybe an 8 and a 9 in 14.
But the 3 of those seasons where they didn't make the playoffs, they would have under the current format. So that's even a better.
They had a 10 and an 8, just to be clear, in 14, and made the playoffs. And they only won 89 games. So yes, they like in the modern era. I'll have to go back and look, and I'll put the numbers in. I'll expand this out to what it would have been, if they had the modern playoff system involved, which is kind of unfair because we'll back up some teams. We won't have 30 teams.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I mean, let's say 90. But the point is, in 3 seasons, they won. If the Royals win 90 games, especially at least the way the standings look right now, they're in an excellent position to make the playoffs.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe not win the division, but make the playoffs. I want to say, was it 2001 or 2002? I don't feel like they had a prolonged winning streak, but they still lost like 95 games. I don't know.
From July 13th to July 20th of 2002,
that's the season.
They managed to win 9 games in a row and went on to win a total of 62.
Yeah, they lost 100 that year. Yeah, that's the one I remember.
I don't know how that happens.
It's baseball, man.
They would come back in 03 and win 93, by the way, I would point out. And in that year, they too also had an 8-game win streak. In fact, they had a 9-game win streak.
Right, they started the season.
Started the year 9-0. So, look, it is a strong, and everything is pointing to it being a good year and better than 50% chance that you're going to make the playoffs. Now, who's their bigger threat to keep them out? Guardians, the team that's been red hot, or Twins, who are the heavy favorite coming in?
Well, first, obviously, this is the first time I believe in the history of this podcast that we have ever discussed the quality of opposition as if it matters. It never mattered before, right? The world's biggest opponent for the last two plus years was their own incompetence. So this is so refreshing that we are talking about, scouting reports on other teams. And I know that Royals fans have been extremely frustrated because the Royals won 8 in a row and gained exactly 0 games on the Guardians who they've been chasing, and actually lost a game on the Guardians yesterday because the Guardians won. And the Guardians are, even after today's loss, 36-18. I believe they were 36-17 in the whole history of the Cleveland franchise. We're talking 124 years now. They had only started a season that hot 3 times: 1920, 1954, and 1995. They went to the World Series all 3 of those years. and they won it in 1920. So, and this, we're talking about the Guardians. So winning a World Series for them is is something of note. So I know people in Cleveland are very excited, and they should be. But first off, I want Royals fans not to freak out about the Guardians. You shouldn't be freaking about any team. It's May. Let's not we haven't even played them yet. For one thing, we have 13 games head-to-head against Cleveland. So, yes, it's frustrating that we couldn't gain ground on them. It's also got to be extremely frustrating if you're a Guardians fan to have an 8-9 game winning streak and look behind you and the freaking Kansas City Royals are still in your rearview mirror. So, it works both ways. But the bigger thing is, on paper, we've talked about this. The one thing that really scares me about the Royals is that they've hit so much better with runners on base and runners in scoring position than they have with the bases empty. And, well, yes, maybe some of that is skill, but most of that's probably luck. And they can't keep scoring runs at the pace that they are, right? Well, however much that applies to the Royals, it applies even more to the Cleveland Guardians.
Why? You don't think their lineup's better?
I'll tell you why. With the bases empty this year, we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. The Royals at that time were the worst team in the American League in terms of OPS with the bases empty. The Royals are now third worst. They're ahead of the White Sox in 14th. And dead last are the Cleveland Guardians with nobody on base. The Royals have a 643 OPS. The Guardians have a 629 OPS. With runners in scoring position, the Royals are second in the American League in OPS. This is the point. Like they were the worst team in the American League with the bases empty, and the best team with runners in scoring position. They're second now. They have a 858 OPS. They're batting 306 with a 377 on base and a 481 slug. The Guardians are first. The Guardians have an 886 OPS. So the Guardians are exactly what the Royals were a week or two ago. Dead last in the league with nobody on base. First in the league with runners in scoring position. So just like the Royals, they are scoring far more runs than you would expect based on their offensive elements. They are 8th in the league in batting average, 4th in on base, 8th in slugging, but 2nd in runs scored. So look, they've been on a heater. They've been beating a lot of, winning a lot of games, taking advantage of a fairly weak schedule in recent days. Just beat up on the Angels. And I think the White Sox before that. But they're probably not, they're not hitting as well as you would think. It's a long season. I think we can catch them, is my point. The Twins, on the other hand, were the team that we thought might have been the best team going into the season and started off really slow. Then they went on a 12-game winning streak and have now kind of fallen back to the pack. Their offense is, I don't think they're lucky or unlucky. Like their offense is below average. They're 8th in the league in runs. They are 11th on base, 7th in slugging. Like the numbers add up there. They have like basically two good hitters in the lineup. If Carlos Correa is healthy, he's a third, but their offense isn't great. But to me, what concerns me is that their pitching staff coming into today was 8th in the league in runs, but they actually have the fewest walks and the most strikeouts in the American League. Their pitching staff, the Twins, the fewest walks, the most strikeouts. Now they've given up probably more than their share of home runs. They're 11th in home runs. Some of that's ballpark influence. But I look at those numbers and I just say, this is a team that's probably gotten a little bit unlucky on fly balls, clearing the fence. But their core skills are definitely there. And obviously today, Joe Ryan and, they struck out, I think, 10 Royals and didn't walk a batter. So the Twins, actually, I worry about that pitching staff heating up and being a problem down the stretch. If I had to pick right now which team is going to finish better, I would probably still pick the Guardians. But that's mainly because they have a 6.5 game lead on the Twins. Like there's a gap to overcome there. But it's very close. So that's why I say these games now, I know we're looking forward to we're playing the Guardians in a week, but don't sleep on the Twins. Like the Twins are actually very much in this race still.
Do you have a point in the season where you go, okay, like the numbers say they should be better and all those numbers say the Twins should be the team? And I agree. I expect a regression from the Guardians. This is the time of year where for baseball betting, I would say, look, go back to what your preseason predictions were and your expectations and factor them back in. Don't get too married to what we've seen out of this sample size. Make sure you remind yourself what it was. And that's that the Twins are pretty good, right? And so you should think about that when you look at a betting line on the Twins and bet that way. And also, remember, we didn't think the Royals were going to be this good. So keep that there as well as they take on a little water when you see the betting lines. But I think the odds makers are doing that as well. That's a betting thing. Put that out to the side, but just something to consider. I'm with you. I do think the Twins are the team that should go ahead and assert themselves, but I think the Royals have proven to be better than what they were supposed to be. So have the Guardians. There are things that are just better, and I don't think they're going away. Twins may catch them and win this, but those two aren't going away. I think the thing for me, though, is like the Padres last year were kind of a really interesting lesson. The run differential kept saying there's a run coming. They're going to take off. They're going to win 16 out of 18. They're going to go on some big run, and they're going to get – and it never, ever came. It kept saying the Marlins are going to fall apart. Their run differential sucks. The Diamondbacks aren't this good. They're probably not going to get there. They're going to get caught leaning for the tape. And at some point, you just kind of become that team that the one at least last year, those three teams, the one-loss record ended up telling the story more than the run differential. You got a time where that starts to be the case?
Well, as you put it, sometimes the time isn't until after the season's over. Like luck averages out in the long run, but the long run can be more than a full season, right? Like you're not going to see that year after year after year. A team, it's almost unheard of for a team year after year after year to exceed their run, what their run differential would tell you their win-loss record will be. But in the span of one season, you said, I mean, it works both ways. The Padres last year just consistently, won fewer games. They lost almost all of their close games. Famously, I remember, I think it was the 2012 Orioles who were like 30-9 in one-run games, and on paper were like a 500 team. And not only, they won 90 games and won the wild card round against the Rangers. The Marlins and especially the Diamondbacks were kind of like that last year. So over a course of a full season, you expect the luck will even out a little, but it doesn't always even out 100%. The thing I will say, though, about run differential, the thing there is that sometimes you can point to a very good reason, which is bullpen quality. If you have an excellent bullpen, I mean, the 2014 Royals won more games than you would expect from the run differential. They only outscored their opponents by like 27 runs, but they made the playoffs because when one run mattered the most in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, they went to HDH and they were fine. The Padres, their bullpen had a lot of holes last year. They traded for Scott Barlow for a reason, right? So that's you can actually explain that. So sometimes with run differential, if you look at the bullpen and you go, you know what, this is, even though this team is winning more games than you would expect from the run differential, there's an explainable reason that is something that will persist. That is not going to regress to the mean. What we're talking about here more is teams just scoring more runs than you would expect from their hits, doubles, triples, home runs based on performance with men on base. That, unlike a bullpen where you can choose what reliever is pitching the 9th inning of a tie game. You can't really choose who's batting with the bases loaded. Batting lineups, you go 1 through 9, you don't get to choose. So that's why it's almost entirely luck when a team does this. It doesn't mean it'll regress at all. The 2013 Cardinals famously hit, I think, like 330 with runners in scoring position for the whole season. It was just a crazy number. The following year, it came back to earth. But it could go on all year. So the longer we go into the season, the more I will put on the performance that the team is doing right now. But a third of the way through the season is still way too early to think this is going to hold up all year. Like, there's still reason to think that what we're seeing here from both the Royals and the Guardians is probably going to regress to the mean.
Again, Asphalt and Concrete proudly serves the greater KC metro area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. Brightly striped lot cuts down on accidents, keeps your parking lot safe as possible. Signage, yep. Bumpers, yes, they do all that. Whether it's seal coating, you name it. Starting from scratch, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Let's turn our attention to Salvador Perez. When do we start going, okay, it's still just a third of a season for him as well, But, he's kind of started hot on the on-base thing for several years now. He had the great 2020 shortened year.
Right.
And then he kind of followed that up the next year, and then he kind of cooled back and went back to who he is, which I always go back to Michael Lewis wrote an addendum to Moneyball in the New Yorker where he wrote about guys like, Mark Teahan turning on the ball his one year, and that, when they start to struggle and the batting average comes down, they resort to what they know. And for Teahan, that's going the other way. And that kind of ended up being what it was. We had that great conversation with Mark last off season where he kind of talked about, what he was doing differently and an injury and everything that went into it and not being able to recapture that moment and everything. Salvador Perez looks like maybe he'd been pushing towards this for a couple of years. And then when things would kind of come off track a little bit, he'd resort back to the old Salvi. You think this has got some staying power?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I am a little worried here, in part because you look at his numbers. Obviously his batting average is, towards a career high, but his walk rate, people he's walking more. It's all relative with him, right? He's 14 walks, but let's not forget 4 of them are intentional. You got to take those out. So 10 unintentional walks in 191 plate appearances, I think it is, or it's 191 at bat. So 211 plate appearances. I mean, that might actually be a career high, but if it is, that's only because Salvador Perez is one of one. His career high in walks, unintentional walks, is 24, I believe. He's on pace for 30. So look, 30 walks is not in any way, shape, or form a patient season. But this is Salvador Perez we're talking about. If he just draws 30 unintentional walks, I think he would be a much more valuable player. So there is a little bit of it there. But when you look at his pitch data at a more granular level, he's swinging at pitches outside the strike zone just as often as ever, if not slightly more. His swing rate on pitches out of the zone this year, depending on which, there's different systems that people use to determine whether a pitch is in the zone or not. StatCast versus, there's all these, different Hawkeye. There's all the different pitch tracking stuff, but all of them say his swing percentage when a pitch is out of the zone is 2 or 3% higher this year than his career average. He is swinging at pitches in the zone more often than before. So overall, he is swinging at pitches more than his career average. The difference is he's making a little bit more contact when he swings outside of the zone. Is that sustainable? So when he's swinging at those sliders, down and away, he's making more contact. If that's something that's real, then he will. I don't know if it necessarily will increase his walk rate, but it will increase keep his batting average up. The one thing that does feel like a legit improvement is his strikeout rate is down. He is not striking out as much. He is making more contact, and his strikeout rate this year is barely 15, almost 16%, which, I mean, that is a huge improvement because as recently as last year, his strikeout rate was around 24%. When he led the league in home runs 3 years ago, he struck out 170 times. He struck out over 25%. So if he maintains his current strikeout rate, he'll end up closer to around 100 strikeouts over a full season. That's somewhere like between 30 and 50 times that he did not strike out that he would have struck out in previous years. So that part of it, so his batting average, it feels like it's going to be hit than it was. He hit 255 last year. He's not a 325 hitter. He's not going to lead the league in batting. Is he a 280 hitter now with a little bit more walks? I'll buy that. But I do think we're going to see some regression here. There's no way he's going to continue this all year.
I'll point to 2 things. One, maybe getting over the Pedro Gafal departure, and maybe being a happier guy. One, a better environment, games mattering, bearing down, not just trying to send one over the fence for the sake of sending one over the fence. I've always wondered how a guy can have 463 plate appearances in the big leagues, go 311, 339, 471, 811 OPS out of the chutes after being rocketed through the minors and then backtrack from there. One is, I don't know, the pitchers aren't taking him serious. The MOs, some minor leaguer or whatever, wasn't a top 100 prospect. Guy's a free swinger, don't really have to work him, so they didn't really attack him. So he bloated up some of those numbers. Then they're like, okay, here's the book on him. Once the book was written, they knew how to go at him. Okay, I'll buy all that. The other thing is, what was said. How about the fact that he's not behind the dish every freaking night? And not that that was wrong to do in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 when they contended all 5 of those years, went to the playoffs 2 of those years. Not to say that, but you do have to wonder if he had caught 10 less games, DH a little bit. This team is constructed to where he can be the DH. Maybe it's just the wear and tear. Maybe the bat's just that much quicker. Listen, Vlad Guerrero, Kirby Puckett, they didn't swing at just strikes. They swung at everything that was out there, and they were good enough to do it. I don't think he's got that kind of frequency of contact, but, I think he is a pretty good bad ball hitter. Ask the A's in the wild card game. He can do some freaky things, and there's some serious bat talent there. And if he's a little rested, a little better, maybe this is the difference.
Yeah. No, I all of that is true. I think I've been saying this for years now that the decision, the not just the decision to have him catch less, but the year off with Tommy John surgery probably, helped keep his bat fresh. And the Royals are, especially given that Freddie Fermin is one of the 7 best hitters on the roster, they need to get him in the lineup. I don't think we've seen Fermin DH yet, or if he has, it's been very little. But they have Salvi at first base or DH a ton because they want Freddie's bat in the lineup, and it keeps Salvi healthy. So that's part of it. You talk about his first 2 years in the majors, he hit 311. Well, here's the thing: in those 463 plate appearances, he only struck out 47 times in almost a full season's bat, 10% strikeout rate. So some of it, one of the people commenters here, Tyler, saying wasn't his first year the only year with Seitzer as his hitting coach. I think it was 2011 and 2012. So the 2 years where he made the most contact, Kevin Seitzer was his hitting coach. But I do think some of it was he sacrificed contact for power because he wasn't a power hitter at that point. He was 21, 22 years old. He had 14 home runs in 115 games. His power started to come on. But yeah, his strikeout totals after that, year by year, 63 strikeouts in 2013, then 85, 82, 119. Stayed at that level for a couple of years. Then he comes back from injury. It was 170, but that he also hit 48 home runs and led the league in homers and RBIs. So there is definitely a trade-off between contact and power. And what has been interesting this year is his contact has improved and his power has not gone down. So that is what is interesting. He's slugging over 500, but making a contact rate we have not seen from him since really 2015 or so, when he was, a guy who would hit 260 and slug in the low 400s. So he's, absolutely, he's a bad ball hitter, and it may just be a matter of he has learned not to swing at the pitch that he has not the slider 2 feet, out of the strike zone, but just the slider 6 inches off the off the corner, and he can at least make contact with those pitches, fight it off, live to fight another day. So again, I do not think he's going to finish the year with a 150 OPS plus and be, necessarily an MVP candidate. But I think he will have probably the best season of his career, certainly since 2021.
Yeah, and that was the conversation. We had a couple of comments about Freddie Fermin, Adam talking about it. Can't remember the last time we had a backup like that. Cotman says, that's what I'm talking about. Freddie helps lengthen the lineup. Part of the reason he lengthens the lineup is because you can put Salvador at first base, putting him at first base because Vinny's not hitting. Right? That's one of the other ones as well. Right? Where's your concern level that Vinny's not hitting again?
So, it's weird because watching him, I feel like I should be worried because I do feel like he doesn't hit with the authority that I saw from him as a rookie or early last year. But maybe this is why we shouldn't just use the eye test and look at the numbers, because I don't catch every single one of his plate appearances. And the data suggests I'm wrong, because his average exit velo this year is 91.8. That's not just better than last year. It's better than his rookie season in terms of his average exit velo. His expected batting average, his expected slug are all 50 points higher than what he's actually doing. Coming today, his expected batting average based on how hard he hits the ball, the launch angle, etc., was 274, and his expected slug was 493. He's hitting the ball hard. He's finding some gloves. I think he's not elevating quite as much as I'd like him to. His launch angle is down this year. It was 17, average 17.4 last year, was 13.9 this year. But his launch angle was only 12 degrees in 2020, his rookie year, and he did fine. I mean, 12, that anything 12 and up is usually enough that you are hitting a fair number of balls in that perfect 25 to 30 degree angle that leads to home runs. The hard hit percentage, every other metric suggests he's doing fine. He's just being unlucky. So my hope there is whatever regression we do see from Salvi, that the loss of Michael Massey right now, like that Vinnie could be the guy to make up a lot of that. I think he's going to be better. Maybe we should hold off on the dreams of him being like, one of the best hitters in the American League that we had before his shoulder started to bark last year. But I think he will end the season as at least an average hitting first baseman, which is to say a very good hitter.
And he needs to be. This team needs that. How about the loss of Massey?
I mean, it's not good, obviously. I mean, people say, oh, well, what does it say about this team that the Michael Massey is a huge loss? Michael Massey is a second baseman who is slugging .529. Like saying that, oh, Michael Massey is not somebody we should miss is like saying that, well, Alec Marsh isn't a guy we should miss. Maybe 6 months ago, but that's the reason the Royals are where they are is that Alec Marsh today is a fundamentally better player than he was last year. Michael Massey, who was making progress last year. Remember, Michael Massey last April was maybe the worst hitter in the league. He was just awful. If you look at his numbers from like May 1st on, he was an average second baseman. That was one of the reasons why he was one of my breakout candidates for this year. And, despite missing time with the bad back at the beginning of the year, he's come back and, hit some huge home runs. He doesn't hit 500-foot bombs, but he has a swing that is optimized for pull power. So he'll hit that 380-foot fly ball that turns into a home run. And when you're a good defensive middle infielder and you can do that, you're a very valuable player.
Or he'll sack fly a guy in, which I think he did Saturday night, right? Like,
yeah,
one of the runs. I mean, there is something hitting the ball in the air deep, even if it's caught.
We're not. I'm trying to think. This is probably certainly the most power hitting duo the Royals have ever had in the middle infield. Like, we've never had a player like Bobby Witt who can play shortstop and hit like this. But like, how many second basemen have the Royals had who are, could reasonably count on for 20 home runs? Frank White hit 20 home runs twice, I think, in his career. But it's just not. It's not something the Royals are usually focused on. And I think it's easy as a Royals fan to just assume that it can't be that valuable because we never do it. But like, a 20-25 home run power from a second baseman will paper over a lot of deficiencies. And the thing is, Massey doesn't really have any deficiencies. Like, he does everything well, and then he has above average power. So I think he's a very good player. The concern I have, obviously, is this is a recurrence. All right, he came out of the game after a home run swing. He hit a home run and didn't bat again. And he came out, and the next day he was on the bench, but he was still on the roster. So I was hoping that was a good sign that he wouldn't have to go on the injured list. But then they put him on they made it sound like it was a abundance of caution. And I will say, now that the injured list for hitters, for position players, is only 10 days, this could be a 10-day and he'll be back, a week from today or a week from tomorrow. But with the backs, it's not enough for me to say that you and I don't know when he'll be back. I don't think the Royals know when he'll be back. And that's what's scary here, is that we just don't know. It's a good sign that he came back and his offensive performance was not affected, because back problems can obviously sap a guy's power. And he came back and his power was fine. So I feel good about that and hopeful that if he comes back reasonably quickly, there's no reason to think that his swing will be affected, that his power will come down. But the Royals already have 3 holes in the lineup. So like they can't afford another one.
Yeah, they did seem optimistic. He said after the game, well, we wanted to get it before it gets worse, before it becomes a thing. And so he thought, okay, they're going to sit him down, maybe out the next day, back in there.
Right.
No, it's a little more than that. So that is concerning. To me, the bigger picture is, I think he's one of the guys they thought they could probably extend and keep in the mix for a reasonable price. That has to go out the window, right? I think they like him a lot, and I think they think he's going to be a solid second baseman. That has to go out the window. You cannot be signing a guy with a back issue to multiple years. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think even before the back flared up, he should not have been. And maybe he was, but he should not have been like the first guy they think about just because of his age. I mean, he's 26 now, and he has barely a year of service time. So basically, by the time he's a free agent, he'll be 31. And a 31-year-old second baseman, like at some point, like he's gonna have to change positions. Like to me, even without the back, like the Royals might be better off just going year to year with him. Um, Regardless, I mean, I think you'll get the best years of his career. Yeah, maybe at 32, maybe he turns into, I don't know, Justin Turner or Daniel Murphy or something, and hits well into his 30s. The Royals can reevaluate that at some point, but there's no rush. You will not be arbitration eligible even next year. Like you have another year at least before you need to decide. I mean, at this point, really, the only guy on the position side that I think the Royals should be talking a long-term contract with is Maikel Garcia, because he's younger than both Massey and Pasquantino, right? He's 24. And he's a guy, I think he has more speed than Massey. So the combination of speed and defense, I think he might age a little bit better. And, if there's one guy on this roster that I think the Royals might want to consider even mid-season talking long-term extension, it would be Maikel. It would not be Massey.
No, I would agree. Yeah, I think, but the Massey thing is big because this is not a lineup that can afford a ding, ding, ding.
Nope.
Right? Like they need all their pieces to be effective. Like they can win some games 3-2, but some days you got to put some runs on the board. And I think that's kind of a big one. Right. So, and I do. And listen, I'm with you. They seem, in my opinion, be a little more excited about him than I would be. But go do something that wouldn't have been wise to begin with. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing in the long run. But backs just terrify me. I hate backs.
Yeah, no. And that's why the fact that it happened again, I will say this: I was really worried when he started the year on the injured list, and like it was among the many reasons why the Royals are better than we expected. Is that when he did, like they survived without him, but then it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence that they got even hotter when he came off the injured list because he really, he has really performed well and showed no signs of the back being an issue. So the fact that it's happened again is dispiriting. It does give me hope that when he does come back, he'll still be able to play at an elite level or the same level he was at before. But yeah, you have to be worried. I mean, this team has been extraordinarily healthy this year, right? They brought up Nick Lofton, who I'd like to see. I mean, by the way, Nick Lofton was hitting pretty darn well in Omaha. Like we talk about like why don't they bring up Drew Waters, but by the end, I mean, Nick Lofton was out hitting Waters and almost everyone else down in Omaha. I mean, his line in Omaha in 24 games, he had a 930 OPS, a 309 batting, 409 on base, 521 slug. And the slug really came on the last 2 weeks before he got called up. I think he slugged like 670 over the last 2 weeks. So, I'd like to see Nick Lofton get some play. But the point is that Nick Lofton was already the only other player aside from the 13 guys on the the projected opening day roster to appear on a game this year. So the Royals still have had just 14 position players on the roster at any point during the season. That's remarkable. They've shuffled through the last two bullpen spots a little bit, but really just two of them. I mean, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, six, at least six guys: MacArthur, Schreiber, Stratton, Serpa, Anderson, and Will Smith. All six of those guys have been on the active roster all season long. And the rotation, aside from Alec Marsh missing 2 starts with a line drive off of his arm, the rotation has made all but 2 starts. So think about that. Like it's basically been one position player spot, 2 bullpen spots have been churned through, and then you had to find an emergency starter twice. So at some point the Royals are going to have to overcome some sort of significant injury. I mean, you saw Ronald Acuna blow out his ACL this weekend, is out for the year. God forbid, if Bobby Witt goes down with an injury like that, everything we've talked about this season is in jeopardy. So the number one thing you have to worry about from game to game is just no significant injuries. This one is not ideal. It happened to a key player, maybe not the key player or one of the 2 key players in Witt and Perez, but a key player, but it's hopefully something you won't keep him out for more than a few weeks, and that he will come back. And I do think with Nick Lofton that they have some options there to get some production from second base while he's gone.
Two quick ones before we go. First of all, adios, Matt Sauer. Comment says, what do you want to say about?
I mean, we talked about it last week that it was time.
Is gone.
Yeah, you and I a week ago were like, Matt Sauer. It's like at some point the Royals, if they're serious about trying to win this year, the expectations have changed. Therefore, the expectations of players has changed. You cannot carry a Rule 5 guy who's not contributing at all. It was a day later they made the decision. Difficult decision, but the right decision. So the Yankees took him back. Clearly, he has enough. There's enough stuff in that arm that they didn't want. They were willing to pay you pay $100,000 to get a Rule 5 guy, but then when you offer him back, the other team has to give you $50,000 to get him back. The Yankees wanted him back. I wish him well. There's a chance in a year or two he might be a quality reliever, but he was the odd man out. They needed some help. Sam Long has looked really good in his 2 outings since they brought him up. Carlos Hernandez is back. His stuff was certainly there. I mean, he's 99 to 101. He almost gave up 3 drives that were all to the warning track. So I'm not, still needs some work there, but they needed some velocity in the pen. But it's a good sign that the Royals are taking this season seriously. Like they're starting to move in that direction. Despite what they're doing with the outfield, at least they're showing some signs that, yes, they need to use every roster spot wisely.
And there are some other options with talent as well. Hernandez has talent. We'll see if he can turn it into production. Speaking of Hernandez, got anything on the this came down in the last couple hours, Angel Hernandez in retirement?
Umpire. Yeah, I just not the news you expect, like he's retiring effective immediately. Not
at the end of the year, he's out now.
I mean, was it just is this the first time in the history of the world that social media was accomplished something good? Was he just sick of getting constantly vilified by every baseball fan on the planet? The suddenness of it almost makes you worried. You would think he would just announce his retirement at the end of the year, and I think people would have been mollified. Look, he wasn't good at his job. I mean, look, some people are just not good at their jobs. It's not necessarily his fault, but the fact that he was able to keep his job for as long as he did, yes, Curtis, bringing all fan bases together. It's a unifying moment. You rarely see sports Twitter, unified, but bitching about umpires is one thing that definitely brings everyone together. I don't want to kick a man when he's down. He had a long career, and I'm sure he's a much better umpire than I would ever be. But I think the game will be just that much slightly better with his replacement.
I would love to hear how this came about. He hasn't umped, as Kurt said, since May 9th. There's been talk that there were negotiations going on about his retirement. It seems that he was forced out.
Which, in some ways, is even more impressive because sometimes you wonder why is it that the sport is so toothless at dealing with, what are clearly some problem. I mean, Joe West, stuck around, and the thing about Joe West, it wasn't even that he was necessarily a bad umpire, but he was such a showboat about it, and it was irksome as a fan that it seemed like the sport was just powerless to, prevent somebody who no fan ever buys a ticket wanting to see Joe West or Angel Hernandez or CB Buckner or Eric Gregg back in the day. Nobody wants to see those guys perform, and to have them take over the oxygen of the sport. So if the powers that be in MLB were able to apply enough pressure, even through the union, to get him to do so, then it means that they do ultimately take these complaints seriously, which is a good thing.
We take our sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, seriously because they're Kansas City's best. When it comes to your parking lot, don't trust somebody just getting into the business or maybe does a little bit of parking lot work on the side. Yeah, we do that kind of here and there. No problem. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot, making parking lot problems disappear for more than 30 years in Kansas City. Take advantage of it right now. Since 1994, they've been the best, whether it's striping, whether it's seal coating, whether it's building a brand new lot. Every single project comes with a written warranty. Why would you go anywhere else? Find them online at ganasphalt.com. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.